Hi, my name is Reza Chitsaz, and I'm a program manager with the Microsoft Office developer team. And today I'll be talking to you about building dashboards and web parts with the Office XP developer. So the agenda for today is we're going to start things off by talking about dashboards and web parts and what they are and what they can do. We'll then move on to talk about Microsoft Office Developer dashboard projects, which is a rich development environment for developers in order for them to be able to build dashboards and build complex web parts. We'll then move on to the features within this development tool. And we'll also have a set of demos that will show you how to use the Microsoft Office Developer dashboard projects. So what is a digital dashboard? The main goal of a digital dashboard is to reduce information overflow. There is a lot of information out there on the web. In many cases, this information is in different places. And it requires, sometimes it requires different applications to get to this information. So a digital dashboard provides the framework that brings this information and services together using a standard-based protocol and presents this information to the end user in a consistent and customizable way. You've probably heard of web parts. Web parts are the web-based content that gets rendered within a dashboard. You can think of a web part as a wrapper around web-based content. So the content can be HTML, XML, or script. It's basically a standard property schema that defines the appearance and behavior of the items within the dashboard. So what kind of data is within a web part? There's basic metadata, things like the name of the web part, description, or the last time the web part was modified. There's appearance properties, so what's the height of the web part or the width of the web part. There's content associated with a web part. This content can either be embedded within the web part, or it could be a URL, or the content can be coming from a URL from the internet or the intranet. And also there's execution properties. So how often do you want the web part to be refreshed within the digital dashboard? Or would you want the web part to run in isolation from other web parts within the digital dashboard? Because of the standard property schema of web parts, these web parts are reusable components. So that means you can have a web part within one dashboard and be able to save it out to another dashboard, and it will appear and behave the way you would expect it to. And finally, a web part is the user interface that displays the web-based content or the information and services to the end user via the dashboard. So why would you want digital dashboards? For the knowledge worker, it's a great way to manage this information overflow. So like I said, there's a lot of information out there. And creating a digital dashboard allows a central place for the end user to go to be able to get to this information. So it allows them to save time and to be able to get to the information that they need at the right time and the right place. There's a lot of end user customization within a digital dashboard. So the features that are there, you can add or remove a web part within a dashboard. So say, for example, there's a dashboard and there's a web part there that has information that you don't really need, and it's kind of it's confusing you, or it's coming to you, but you don't want it. So you can go in and easily remove this web part from the dashboard. And you can also customize it, so you can move the layout around. So if there's some web parts that you're more interested in, you can move it to the top of the dashboard. There's also a rich catalog of web parts that an end user can use and import these web parts into their dashboard. So if there are certain piece of information that they need, they can potentially get it from one of these pre-made web parts. And finally, a web part allows an end user to interact with the information via the dashboard. So from a developer's perspective, a digital dashboard provides a standard framework There's a lot of built-in features within a dashboard. There's a whole infrastructure that allows developers to be able to customize the portals. So there's layout pages that allow a developer to be able to lay the web parts out within a page very easily and quickly. There's also a settings page that allows a developer to set the appearance of the dashboard. So the look and feel of the dashboard can be easily set using this built-in feature of the dashboard. And finally, there's also event management. There's a whole event management component known as the Digital Dashboard Services component that allows developers to build web parts that can communicate with each other and allow them to build web parts that are truly they're independent from other web parts. So you can have web parts that communicate with each other, but yet if you remove one web part, the other web part will still function. So they're independent, but yet it can be made to communicate. This allows developers to build applications that are that can basically communicate with each other. And of course, there's also a rich library of web parts that developers can also use. It's a great way for people to create a dashboard really quickly is to use these pre-existing web parts that are part of the digital dashboards. So here we're going to take a look at the end user experience. What you see there is a digital dashboard. There's a title associated with a digital dashboard. There's also a navigation bar that displays any sub-dashboards that are within a dashboard. And the boxes that you see there are the web parts. There's a bunch of end-user actions that you can take on a web part. You can minimize or maximize a web part. You can add or remove a web part. And there's also a set of other customizable attributes on web parts. You can see at the bottom there the web part catalog. So what we're showing there is that you can easily add and remove web parts from a web part catalog. An interesting thing to take note of is if you're a developer and you've created a dashboard and there's a web part in there that you don't want end users to be able to remove, you can set a property on the web part to disallow users from being able to remove that web part from a dashboard. Also, there's a property that will allow you to restrict users from minimizing certain web parts within the dashboard. So this all started with the Digital Dashboard Resource Kit. The DDRK 2.01 was released on June 2000. There was about 700,000 copies released. And it allowed for flexible storage options. So there was support for the file system, dashboard, the Exchange web storage system dashboard, and a SQL Server dashboard. There was enhanced UI in the dashboards that were part of the DDRK 2.01. So there's a lot of customization pages that allowed you to change the layout of the content within the dashboard, and also set the settings of the dashboard itself. There was also a few sample dashboards, so it's a great way for developers to see and learn, how to develop and how to build dashboards. So there was a sample for the file system, there was a sample for the Exchange web storage system, and a sample for the SQL Server dashboards. And finally, there was a web part builder that was a Visual InterDev COM add-in that was a development environment for developers in order to build complex web parts. And of course, there was the web part gallery, which had a bunch of pre-made web parts for people to be able to import into their dashboards. The DDRK 3.0, the beta 1, is in March, on March 7th, 2001. It will be RTMing in April 30th. There are more resources, so there's more samples and white papers within the DDRK 3.0. So again, it's a great place for developers to go to and learn more about dashboards and learn more about how to build web parts and how to build web parts that can communicate and build better web parts and web parts that are independent from other web parts. There's also support for mobile devices, so for PDAs or for smartphones. There's also more web parts for developers to be able to import into their dashboard projects. So there's a richer catalog of web parts that developers and users can get their hands on. And finally, there's some factory updates on the SQL factory that increases performance and manageability of the SQL dashboard factory. So now we'll talk about mod dashboard projects. What we have done is we've created a rich tool for developers to use in order to create and build complex web parts. So we make use of the Microsoft development environment. We're inside the Visual Studio shell, which is great because it's a common development environment for developers. So for all you people out there that are currently developing in Visual Studio applications, you'll get the same look and feel within our development environment for web parts. We make use of the Solution Explorer, which hierarchically represents the dashboard, its resources, any web parts or sub-dashboards that are within the dashboard. We also make use of the property grid, which displays the web part schema and the dashboard schema. So you can get into the property grid and quickly make changes to the properties of the web parts, change the layout, change the execution, or change the content. All the editing, scripting, and HTML editing will take place in the common HTML editor, which is the same editor that Visual Studio uses for editing HTML. The two stores that we provide support for are the Exchange 2000 server and the SharePoint portal server. So let's go take a look at what our dashboard projects look like. So we'll go to Start, Programs, Office Developer, and the Microsoft Development Environment. Go to File, New Project. So what we're doing now is creating a new dashboard project. So I'll select the dashboard project template, and we'll give it a name. Call it Dashboard 11. I just want to make sure I don't have one there. So what's happening now is all the ASP, XML, XSL files are being copied from the client onto the server. So this is the dashboard factory that's being copied from the client onto the server. And this dashboard factory is used in constructing, in basically building the web parts and sending it off to the client for it to be rendered by the dashboard. So while that's happening, I'll just go through the features of the Microsoft Office development environment for dashboard projects. So we allow users to create new digital dashboards. So this is the process of sending the dashboard factory from the client up onto the server. So all the required files that are needed in order to build the web parts and be able to display it and render it up on the client is done by the dashboard factory. We allow users to create web parts. So HTML, XML, VB script, or JavaScript web parts can be created from our development environment. We also allow creating sub-dashboards. So I showed you earlier, you can create dashboards within dashboards. So you can kind of nest, the dashboards within each other. And we also allow setting the dashboard and web part properties. So via the properties grid, you can go in there and set the properties, how you'd want the web part to behave, or what the settings you want on the dashboard can all be done via the properties grid. A couple interesting scenarios that we also do support is opening existing dashboards. So you probably know about the SharePoint portal server. The workspace that's created within the SharePoint portal server is in fact a dashboard. So an interesting scenario is you can open this workspace within the Microsoft Office development environment, and you can get all the dashboards, any sub-dashboards, the web parts, the resources, all the properties will all be exposed to you. So you can quickly develop web parts, and you can edit web parts that are already within the SharePoint portal workspace. Another scenario we also support is opening personal dashboards, and all personal dashboards are dashboards that have been deployed using SharePoint portal server, using a SharePoint portal server workspace. So there's more features. We allow you to export the web parts that you've created within the Microsoft Office development environment onto the file system. So say you've developed a couple web parts that are really cool and that you want to post them up somewhere, put them up on a share or something. Say your web parts got a bunch of resources as well. So all you do is you select the web part, and you can do a save as onto the file system, and it will be copied over as a file, an XML file that has all the web part properties associated with it, and all the resources will also be copied down onto your client machine. I'll be showing you how to do these things in the demos later on. We also allow importing the web part that we just created. Obviously, if you just saved it onto your file system, you want someone to be able to import it in. So we allow that scenario as well. Any resources that the web part has, again, will be automatically imported into the dashboard project. Another interesting scenario is save copy as. So say you have a dashboard that you've built. It has a bunch of web parts. It has properties set on those web parts. It has sub-dashboards and a bunch of resources. So we allow you to save this whole dashboard and the whole all its contents from one store location to another store location. And finally, we allow a way to quickly preview the dashboard that you're working on from within our App ID. So let's go back to the development environment. What you see here on the right-hand side is the Solution Explorer, and in here we are showing the dashboard, the main dashboard, its resources folder that contains the dashboard factory, and by default we add a web part, an HTML web part, as a kind of starting place for the developer, a place for them to start developing their dashboard projects. Down here, we take a look at the properties grid. I mentioned earlier the whole web part schema is displayed here in the properties grid. So we have the allow, minimize, or allow, remove, cache behavior properties. And as you can see, there's a whole slew of them. I mentioned earlier that you can, as a developer, you can restrict an end user from removing a web part from the dashboard. So this would be this property here, allow, remove. I can set it to false, and any user hitting this web page won't be allowed to remove this web part from the dashboard. I'm going to set that back to true for now. So let's take a look. Oh, over here again we have the common HTML editor. This is where all the scripting takes place. As you can see, we have color coding and statement completion, which is really cool. And over on the left-hand side, we have the toolbox, which has the design time, the HTML design time controls that you can quickly add into your web part. So I'm just going to add some content here. And I'm going to save my changes. I'm going to go back and I'm going to preview this dashboard. So I just want to show you what a dashboard looks like by default. So there we have the digital dashboard. We have the title. We have the content and layout pages here at the top. And finally, we have that one web part that was added in by default and the contents that I put in there. This is really cool. So again, you have the minimize and maximize button and also the close button. So let me add a couple pre-existing web parts. So let's add the Outlook inbox. Now this is a web part. There's about 7 web parts that will be shipping within the Microsoft Office development environment. These are web parts that are pre-made and are fully functional. So these are sitting on my file system right now, and I will import this into the project. So here we see the web part's been added, and the resources associated with the web part have also been added. So here are a set of XML files and a few GIFs. I'm going to go back and add in another web part, add existing item. Let's add the Outlook Notes web part. And again, we see the resources have been added. Let me save my changes and preview this dashboard. It's asking for authentication. Now we see these two web parts that we just added in. So as you can see, in a matter of minutes, we were able to build a dashboard that has two fully functional, very useful web parts added to it. So I have my Outlook inbox. I can compose new messages here. As you can see, I've got two messages waiting here in my inbox. I also have my Outlook Notes web part that here's one note that I'd added in earlier on today. And finally, the HTML web part that I'd added to the dashboard project a little earlier. So let's start talking about the digital dashboard services component. This is a client-side component that is included in every dashboard as a hidden object. The use of this component makes it really easy to build web parts that are reusable and to build web parts that can communicate with each other because there's a standard infrastructure that you can use in order to build these. There's a set of services that are provided to the end user or to the developer in building these web parts. The services are part discovery, which allows web parts to discover other web parts on a dashboard. There's part notification that allows web parts to respond to external events that occur at the dashboard or the web part level. There's session state management that allows web parts to interchange information and objects within a browser session. There's state management that allows dashboards and web parts to hold or maintain a global state. And there's also item retrieval, which allows web parts to retrieve and maintain the state of items in the store. I'll be talking about the parts notification, and I'll also be doing a demo on the session state management later on today. So the use of the digital dashboard services component allows you to build web parts that can communicate, but yet are independent of each other because the DDSC acts as an intermediary between the web parts. So let's talk about the notification functions. So before I do my demo, I just want to give you a bit of background of what we're doing. A part registers its interest for an event with the DDSC using the register for event method. There are three parameters that this method takes: the namespace URN, which uniquely identifies the event. There's the event name, and there's also a function that there's a callback function that you want to call when this event occurs. And a part will publish an event by using the raise event method, which again takes three parameters: the namespace URN, which uniquely identifies the event, and the event name, and finally an event object, which is the value that you want to raise when the event, or when you want to raise the event. So let's go take a look at how to do this within our app ID. So let me create a clean slate here. I'm just going to delete these parts that I added earlier. Oh. Got to create a new project. I deleted the resources folder by mistake. So what's happening now is I'm creating a new project. So again, the ASP files, the XML files, and the XSL files are used in in building the web parts and passing them over to the client for rendering. It's all being created up on the server. So there's an initial hit that we take in creating the dashboard the first time, but after it's been created the first time, any subsequent calls that we do go straight to the server, and the store.asp, which lives on the server, handles these calls and basically creates web parts and allows us to create sub-dashboards. So this should be coming up any second. Yeah, I just created another dashboard, and as you can see, the part was added in for me by default. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the Code Librarian, which is a feature of the Microsoft Office development environment that allows developers to store their code in a library. So here we have the Code Librarian, and here's the code that I'd added in here earlier on. I'm just going to drag some of the code over from the Code Librarian into the script editor. So all this code is a simple select statement. There's 3 values that I can return with this select statement. There's 3 car values. I really like cars, so this demo is going to be talking about cars. There's a BMW value, there's a Porsche value, and there's a Mercedes. And down here I have a send notification function that uses the DDSC component raise event method that has the namespace your and my company car. It has the name on select and the value that I want to return, cars for sale value, which is the value that's being returned by the select statement over here, cars for sale. So we're going to be returning this value when we raise the event. So let me rename this part. I'm going to call it select. And I'm going to add another part. Add the picture of car. So this web part is going to be registering for the event. So we're using the register for event method. We're applying the namespace, the name of the event on select, and a callback function. So the function that we're calling here is display car info, which takes the value that was raised in the other web part, and depending on what the value is, it will load the appropriate image. So if the value was BMW, we're going to be loading this JPEG. If the value was Porsche, we'd be loading another JPEG. So let me rename this part to picture. There's also resources associated with this web part, so I'm going to go in and add a folder where I'm going to be adding these resources into. It's called the folder picture files. And then I'll right-click on the folder and add the resources. So I'm pulling these resources up from my file system. Now I'll go up and add another web part. And let me drag the code in from the code librarian. And over here again, we're calling the register for event method from the DDSC, and we're applying the namespace, the name of the event, and the callback function, display car info, which again is a simple case selection that will select the appropriate video to display according to what the value of the car was. So let me rename this part as well. And add in the resources. So I want to add a folder. Now that I've done that, I'm going to save all my changes, and let's take a quick look at what we just did. So here we have the three web parts that I added. We've got the select web part that you can select which car you want to view. You have the picture web part that will be showing the picture of the car that we selected, and the video web part. So these three web parts are communicating using the web part notification service provided by the Digital Dashboard Services component. So let me select the BMW. Look at that. The event was raised from the select web part, and the two other web parts that are registered for the event received the notification and displayed the appropriate image and video. So let's show another one. I'm going to go flip back into the development environment, and let's start moving things around in here. I don't like the way this page is looking right now. So let's select the select web part. I want to move this up to the top. So let's go find the zone property and set it to the header. Let's go take a look at the picture property and set this on the left. And finally, let's go to the video web part and set this on the right. Let's go back and see what this looks like now. So as you can see, we're able to move things around really quickly using the digital dashboard. Let me go back to the presentation. So next thing I want to show you, the next demo that I'm going to do is it uses a session state service. So the session state, as we mentioned earlier, provides a mechanism for web parts to interchange context information within a dashboard session. So there are three functions or methods that they can call. First thing is setting the session state using the put session state method, which has a namespace URN which uniquely identifies the session, the name of the session, and the value that we want to put into the session state. We have the retrieving session state, which uses the get session state method that has a namespace URN which uniquely identifies the session state and the name of the session state. And this returns a value that we can put in any variable. And finally, we have clearing session state. which allows you to clear any session states on the namespace that you give it. So the clear session state method has a namespace URN, which uniquely identifies the session state and the name of the session state. So let's go take a look at how that will work. I'm going to be building on this example here. So what I want to do now is have a sub-dashboard, which I can create by doing add new sub-dashboard. So I want to have a web part in a sub-dashboard that knows what the state is depending on what the state is within the other dashboard. So depending on what car I select in the first dashboard, I want this session state to be reflected within the second dashboard, the sub-dashboard. And I want to set a certain field within that web part to show that this is actually happening. So I just created a new dashboard. I'm going to call this dashboard, let's rename it, call it, I don't know, more info. And I'm going to be adding a web part to the sub-dashboard. So all this is a bunch of text fields. Here we have text field. We have given one of the text fields an ID, so cars for sale. Down here, we're going to be setting the cars for sale value to the digital dashboard services component get session state method, which will return what the session state is for the given namespace and given name of the session state. So I'm going to rename this web part as well. Say sales info. And we're going to go back. We need to put the session state before we can get it. So I'm going to go to the picture web part, and I'm going to put the session state here. So here we put the digital dashboard services component, put session state, the namespace, the name of this put session, and the value that I want to put into this session state. And we also need to clear the state after the function has been called. So here what we're doing is clear session state, and we're giving the namespace and the name of the session state. So let me save all my changes. Go back to the dashboard. Let's refresh the view. So here we can select the cars. So let's select the Porsche. And now I'm going to flip to the other dashboard that we just created. However, you can see here that depending on the car that I selected in the first dashboard, the session state method is giving me the selected item from the first dashboard here within this text field. So you can see you can do some pretty interesting things by using the digital dashboard services component. You can start doing some fancy things with this. I'm going to flip back to the presentation. So let's talk about the SharePoint portal. So like I mentioned earlier, the SharePoint portal workspace is in fact a digital dashboard. So what we've done here is we've already opened the workspace, the SharePoint portal workspace within the Microsoft Office development environment. So what you're seeing here is in fact the SharePoint portal workspace. So all the sub-dashboards are here, being displayed for us. The web parts that are within the sub-dashboard, the actual web parts within the workspace, and all the properties of the web parts are here as well for us to get to. So let me quickly create a web part here. Well, let me first show you what the workspace looks like. Probably be a better idea. So here we have a SharePoint portal workspace. As you can, there's a bunch of web parts here. There's a advanced search web part. There's different category web part. There's the news web part, and there's a personal dashboard web part that allows you to create dashboards using the SharePoint portal. So I'm going to go back into our development environment, and I'm going to quickly add a web part here. Let's add a new item. And let's make it big and bold again. My SharePoint portal server web part. Let's save the changes. And let's have this web part show up in the footer. And let's see what this looks like now. For some reason it didn't show. Maybe it doesn't like the location. Left. I'm not sure what's happening here. There we go. So there's the web part, my SharePoint portal server web part that I just added into the SharePoint portal workspace. Another really cool scenario that I'm just going to show you really quickly would be, say for example, I've got an Excel document that I want to save as a web part. So here's a bunch of calculations that I did on the fancy car that I'm going to buy, and I want to post this as a web part up on the digital dashboard. So I can do a file, save as web page, and then point it to the portal, point it to the workspace on SharePoint portal server. And I'd like to save it into the portal folder where the digital dashboard factory resides. Let me try saving this in here. So here we get a web file properties. So what's happened is the Office application recognizes that I'm trying to save this Excel document into a dashboard, and it's asking me, what do I want to set these properties as? So I'm going to give it a name. So let's say, let's call this payment information. There's a description that I could fill in. I'm going to leave that blank. And I want to include this web part in the dashboard. And let's give it a location. Let's put it on the left as well. Let's move it over onto the right, actually, and go OK. So what's going to happen is saving this Office document, Excel document, into the SharePoint portal will wrap this Excel document with all the properties that are associated with a web part. So let me go in and take a look at what this looks like. It's not showing up. Let me refresh. Try to get to it this way. There we go. So here we see over on the right-hand side, there is the Excel document that I just added in, the payment information. There's the Excel document. It's saved as a web part here within my workspace. So it's a great scenario for being able to create Office documents and being able to save them as web parts into a digital dashboard. So let's wrap things up here. What did we talk about today? We talked about dashboards and web parts. So we did an overview of what they are and how they can be used to help the end user in getting to the right information at the right time, using the right tools. We also talked about Microsoft Office developer dashboards and the features that are included. We saw how we can create web parts within the development environment. We took a look at the development environment, the Solution Explorer, the Properties Grid, the standard HTML editor. We also looked at the other features, being able to save a web part as onto the file system, being able to import pre-existing web parts. We also took a look at a few pre-existing web parts that we added into our dashboard project, the Outlook parts, the inbox, and the Outlook Notes part. We also made use of the Digital Dashboard Services component that provided certain services that allowed developers to build web parts that are independent and to build web parts that can communicate with each other. We finally finished things off by opening the SharePoint Portal Server workspace in the Microsoft Office development environment, and we were able to add web parts into the workspace. Endless possibilities are available there. You can edit the web parts that are already there. You can add existing web parts. You can really truly build complex, rich solutions using the Microsoft development environment. And finally, we took a look at saving Office applications as web parts into a digital dashboard workspace. So if you want more information, there's the Digital Dashboard Resource Kit 2.01 and 3.0 available at the SQL Dash website. And there's also an external website that you can go to that has information regarding digital dashboards available at www.microsoft.com digital dashboard. So I had a really good time. It was a lot of fun. I hope you all had a good time as well, and hope to see you all around soon. Thank you.